Welcome back, anatomy students. Today in class we did a little exploratory activity where you investigated the body systems. You looked for specific organs that were related to each system, and then you tried to connect your system to somebody else's system, and you talked about how all the systems interact. Today I'm going to be a little bit more explicit and identify the specific organs I'm looking for on a test to be related with each body system, and then as well the major functions you should be able to connect with each of those systems. So the integumentary system isn't one of the systems we did in class today, but it's basically it's your outer covering. So it's your skin, your hair, your nails. If you were a bird, it would include feathers. If you were a horse, it'd include hooves. But we're only talking about the human anatomy this whole semester, so we'll just look at the skin, hair, and nails. The job of any outer layer is to protect and cushion what's underneath. So that could be your whole skin, or it could be the outer layer of a muscle, outer layer of a bone. Any outer covering's job is basically for protection. It might be protecting you from injury. It might be protecting you from infection. So your skin is your first layer of immunity in that it keeps foreign invaders from getting in. It also allows you to help regulate your temperature. You shiver, the muscles underneath your skin are going to produce heat. And when you're too hot, you sweat. That perspiration, it's not the liquid sweat that is making you cool, but it's the process of evaporation. So when the skin, or when the liquid turns from a liquid to a gas, it has to use the heat energy from your skin in order to do that. So it's actually the evaporation that cools you. You're also going to release some salts and urea, so some products maybe that your body needs and some that you don't need, which is why we take in electrolytes after exercise. Also, it has a number of sensory receptors that monitor your external environment for temperature, pain, pressure, and allows your skin to talk to your brain. And then finally, the really cool thing is that sun stimulates your skin to produce vitamin D. How cool is that? We produce vitamins. You might be familiar with your skeletal system because you may have broken a bone before. So we're all going to have a different level of understanding to begin with. The skeletal system is our first full chapter that we'll cover, and it's made up of bones, cartilage, and ligaments. Ligaments hold bones to bones. The job of the skeletal system, you probably can guess, is to support your body. Like we're standing on our legs, we know that our bones allow us to do that. It's also a framework for the attachment of muscles. So muscles produce movement by pulling on bone. Your rib cage, you know, is protecting your lungs and your heart, some major organs inside there. So another job of the bones is to protect your internal organs. What organ does your skull protect? Your brain. Another job is to store minerals like calcium. We'll talk about how the blood calcium levels are regulated, and if you have too much calcium, it's stored in your bones. And if you don't have enough calcium, like when you have osteoporosis, it's stripped from your bones. And finally, you hear EPO in the sports world. EPO is a hormone that stimulates your red bone marrow inside your bones to produce red blood cells. So that's where our blood comes from. It comes from our bones. Next chapter we'll cover is the muscular system, and again we'll have varying levels of understanding. You may have torn a muscle, you may have strained a muscle, pulled a muscle. You may play sports, you may not play sports. You may be in the gym getting swole, as I know our boys like to say. So it's made up of your muscles, and also you have muscles lining your organs and your blood vessels. So what it does is obviously produces movement. How does it produce movement? I already mentioned it pulls on bones. How does it pull on bone? By shortening. So this will be the first big piece of physiology we cover is the sliding filament theory. Look at this dude. Any of you go to that human bodies exhibit? It's kind of cool. Another thing your muscles do is produce heat. So when they're contracting, when they're getting smaller, they're changing chemical energy into two things, mechanical energy and heat energy. You have three types of muscle tissue. We'll cover these in detail when we get to that chapter, not so much now. But they're structurally different and just a little bit different in functionality, but mostly that's the same. So you have cardiac tissue found in your heart, You have smooth muscle that's found in your organs, and you have skeletal muscle that is attached to your bones, which you typically think of as your muscles. The job of the nervous system is to monitor your internal and external environment, decide what's going on, and then make changes. So what allows us to do that? We have lots of sensory receptors in all of our organs and skin, and then you have nerves that are leading to your spinal cord, and then your spinal cord goes to your brain. So you have monitor environment, integrate information, and then carry out a response. This is a fast-acting control system in that it allows for the release of neurotransmitters, a chemical messenger that goes from cell to cell. It's made up of the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, and sense receptors. I kind of mentioned that with this picture. Its job is to monitor the internal environment for changes and the external. Can you think of any external changes that you respond to? One really easy one is thinking of the stoplight. We react when we have a red light or a green light. The common stereotypical example, when you put your hand on a hot stove and you take it off. Another one I like to think of is when I was a kid anyways, the teachers would turn the lights down and we'd have to put our head down and be quiet. And so that was a response to the stimulus. Usually students don't find it too difficult to come up with external stimuli, but internal they're not as familiar with. So do you have any ideas of what an internal stimulus might be? Ooh, I'm thirsty. Let me take a drink. Did you get that? So the internal stimuli was thirst, and I responded by getting a drink. So obviously hunger is going to be an internal stimuli as well. But a couple other ones, like your blood sugar levels, you've experienced when you get lethargic or when you get hyperactive. You have maybe even experienced changes in your blood pH. When your blood pH is too acidic, your body responds by speeding up your breathing. And when your blood is more basic, it slows everything down. So that would be a couple examples of internal stimuli. Kind of similar to the nervous system in that it is using chemical messengers to talk between body parts is the endocrine system. The endocrine system is made up of your glands. And where do you have glands? You have some in your brain. You have your pituitary gland. You have your thyroid and parathyroid gland. In the skeletal system, I was talking about the calcium regulation. So these two glands are responsible for that. The thymus gland is responsible for making T cells, which are related to your immune system. And then you have the pancreas, which is going to make things related to the digestive system. You have your pineal gland. You have adrenal gland sitting up here on top of your kidneys. You've heard of adrenaline before. And then you have ovaries and testes, which we talked about in 9th grade. One of the differences between the endocrine system and the nervous system is that the nervous system is fast to respond and the endocrine system is slow. It's slow to respond, but its response has a longer lasting effect. So the endocrine system is going to release hormones. They travel through the bloodstream. So the kidneys release that EPO I mentioned earlier. That EPO travels to the bone and the bone starts creating red blood cells when your body is low on oxygen. So it was responding to a stimulus. The endocrine system is not a system we'll cover in its entire detail. We'll just mention it as it relates to each of our other systems. Can you think of any hormones we covered in 9th grade biology during sex ed? Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, all examples of hormones. I think ever since elementary school, we've been learning about our cardiovascular system. So this one you should be really familiar with. So I'm sure you know the heart pumps blood and the vessels move blood. So these red vessels are typically arteries because they're carrying oxygenated blood. We show that in red. And then these vessels over here are veins and they're deoxygenated. So we show that in blue. Your blood actually isn't blue. We won't be doing the cardiovascular system until 2nd semester. What do those vessels carry? They carry blood. And what does your blood carry? It carries nutrients like amino acids and glucose. It also carries oxygen. We need that to create energy. It carries those hormones we were just talking about. Look at how all these systems are interconnected. It also is going to get rid of waste, so it's going to take things away from the body cells. Another part that is kind of related to the cardiovascular, because it's in the blood, are those white blood cells. And those white blood cells help fight foreign invaders. So bacteria and things that don't belong in your body, they're going to eat them up. And that keeps us from getting sick. When people mention the immune system, they're more specifically talking about the lymphatic system, so more proper. The lymphatic system is made up of a number of vessels, lymphatic vessels, that look just like blood vessels. So we say they are complementary to the cardiovascular system because they're going to run parallel with one another. Also in our lymphatic system, we have lymph nodes. When you go to the doctors, they palpate your neck to see if your lymph nodes are swollen. You also have lymph nodes in your armpits, in your groin, in your stomach. Also, your spleen and tonsils are part of the lymphatic system. So when I was a kid, everybody got their tonsils out when they were sick. Hardly anybody my age has tonsils. But with science, the more we know, we change things. So we've learned that tonsils are actually very helpful in fighting infection. So now kids don't get their tonsils out. So most of you and your classmates will have your tonsils, and maybe 4 out of the whole class had their tonsils removed. So why is it running complementary with the cardiovascular system? Because your blood vessels get leaky. Like your blood isn't spewing out or anything, but plasma is coming out of it, especially if you have an injury. So the job of the lymphatic vessels is to return that blood to the heart, and then it gets back into the bloodstream. Another thing that happens as it's taking that plasma back to the heart, notice it's passing all these lymphatic lymph nodes. So the lymph nodes house those white blood cells I just talked about. Look at the interconnection again. And those white blood cells then gobble up any foreign invaders that are in that plasma that don't belong. And so it helps you keep healthy. Due to the common colds and allergies and asthma, a lot of us are familiar with our respiratory system. So you guys are coming into this year already knowing a ton of information. So if you can connect to what you already know, that kind of should release your stress. So the respiratory system, we breathe through your nose or your mouth, and then it travels through your pharynx. That's a new word. It simply is your throat. From the pharynx, we go into the larynx, which is your voice box, and your trachea, which is your windpipe. And then these branches inside are called bronchi. And then the bronchi end in alveoli, and that's where gas exchange is actually taking place. So all of this is inside of your lungs. Respiratory system, very simple. Its job is to supply the body with oxygen, which we need to make energy, and to remove CO2, which is a byproduct of respiration. Who doesn't love to eat? Because we do. We have the digestive system. The digestive system is made up of the alimentary canal. That's a big word. The alimentary canal is made up of your mouth and your pharynx, once again, connected to the respiratory system. Your esophagus, which is your food tube, your stomach, where mechanical and chemical digestion occurs, your small intestine, and your large intestine, and then that finishes in the rectum. Associated with digestion is the liver and the gallbladder. The liver produces bile, stored in the gallbladder, and released into the small intestine for digestion. I'm not sure if I mentioned pancreas before, but the pancreas is making a number of enzymes that are needed to break down molecules. So that's what the digestive system does. It takes your food, breaks it down little by little into individual molecules so that they can be absorbed into your bloodstream and provide the rest of your body cells with nutrients. In the large intestine, we're going to reclaim water. So think, a lot of the foods that you're eating have a lot of water in them, especially fruits. And then, of course, we're drinking liquids that have water in them. So the large intestine is going to reclaim that, put it into the bloodstream, and that's going to kind of pump up your blood volume. You might think this is weird, but the urinary system is one of my favorites. And that's because this is when we get to talk about biochemistry. And I'm a biology major and a chem minor. So anytime I can combine those two together, it's awesome. So in 9th grade, we talked about this because it was pretty much next to our reproductive system. So the kidneys, the ureters, the bladder, and the urethra. So it's also called the excretory system because it's getting rid of waste. Most of the waste it's getting rid of are nitrogenous. Too much of this nitrogenous waste can be toxic, so we got to get rid of it. It also, this is where it gets a little bit trickier, maintains the water and salt balance. And what do I mean by water? Like in between each of your cells and inside of your cells, there's water. And the amount of water and salt in other solutes determines which direction fluids are moving, 9th grade osmosis. Also, it adds to your blood volume. So if your blood pressure is too high, you might have too much volume in your blood, and so it's going to help get rid of that extra liquid, and vice versa. If your blood volume is low, it's going to reclaim water, add it to your blood volume to bring up the pressure. Kind of cool. And then we get into the really chemistry stuff, the acid and base balance of your blood. So before I talked about how acid and base can cause us to hyperventilate or perhaps go into a coma. So when your blood is too acidic, all your systems speed up. When it's too basic, all your systems slow down. So the urinary system is going to play a key role by absorbing or excreting acids or bases, depending on which is needed. And the last system is the reproductive system. Again, this isn't a system I'm going to cover in class because we already did it in 9th grade, so we don't need to do it again. We will, however, cover it when we do our dissection of the fetal pig at the end of the year. And then you're going to see that the inside of the female pig and the inside of the male pig structurally are very similar. And it's easy to confuse one for the other. So that's so cool to know that we're really so much alike. So males, we've talked about this in 9th grade, made up of the scrotum, the testes, the whole duct system, which is really referring to like the vas deferens and all of the little tubes connected to it. And of course the penis. The female, we have the ovaries, which are analogous to the testes. We have the fallopian tubes, analogous to the vas deferens. We have the uterus and the vagina as well. So the primary function of the reproductive system is simply to reproduce the species. So this is how we produce offspring, and it allows for generations and generations to occur. So that's the 11 systems you need to know for your test. On the test, you should be able to identify the major organs that are involved with each system. So that is probably going to be like a matching set, and also the major function related to each system. So either of these actually make for good multiple choice or matching. You can make some flashcards, quiz yourself, or there's lots of Quizlets already online created. So thanks for listening and good luck.